Hello everyone, this is Siddharth Patel from the Department of Political Science and Public Administration, the Bhopal School of Social Sciences. In this video, we are going to learn about the institution of foreign policy formulation. We have already discussed about what is foreign policy, what are the determinants of foreign policy, how state interact in the outer world. So please go through the previous videos and try to learn from these videos. Now in this video particularly I will be talking about institutions like Ministry of External Affairs. We will be talking about other institutions like business lobbying. We will be talking about Prime Minister's office, that is PMO. How these institutions influence or determine the foreign policy formulation. Institutions are important while forming foreign policy. Institutions decide the final contours of foreign relation of a state. Institution and the quality of their consultation and functioning often influence the degree of rationality demonstrated by the state actors in the foreign arena or international events. Now, the first institution or the first person who determine the foreign policy is cabinet. In cabinet, basically we talk about the core ministries, the part of executive. These have the major say in the foreign policy formulation. Cabinet also have the core consultative group. Now, what do you mean by core consultative group? In core consultative group, there is a finance minister, there is a foreign minister, that is Minister for External Affairs, there is a home minister and defense minister. It is a part of core consultative group. It is wrong to say that if I say only our foreign minister or only our external and affair minister determine the foreign policy, then this statement will be wrong. Because in formulating any foreign policy, the role of finance minister or the role of defense minister is also very much important. Because if suppose I am purchasing some arms and ammunition from other country, so our defense minister will be dealing with that. Suppose we are dealing with the economy or we are dealing with the trade, our finance ministry will be dealing with that part. So, Ministry of External Affairs, Home Minister, Finance Minister, Prime Minister, these all are the part of core consultative group. So, cabinet play an important role in the foreign policy formulation. Cabinet has the greater say in the foreign policy formulation. Now, the second institution is the Parliament of India. Now, here the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha play an important role. As you know, we are having a parliamentary form of government where the executive are responsible to the parliament. In parliament, the parliamentarian asks the question from the executive that why you are adopting certain type of policy, that why we are having trade with the China or why we are having trade with the US or why we are not having trade with the Russia. So, our minister, our prime minister are responsible towards parliament. They have to give answer, they have to give each and every answer in the parliament, whatever question raised in the parliament. Now, here we can compare the Parliament of India with that of USA. In USA, you are well aware with the Senate, House of Senate and all, Congress and all. So, how the presidential system work there and how the parliamentary system work in the India. So, in India, our executive are responsible towards parliament, whereas if I talk about United States of America, there the executive is not responsible towards legislature. As in United States of America, we witness that there is a strict separation of power between all three organs, that is executive, legislative and the judiciary. Now, in case of India, whenever our government sign an agreement with any foreign country, they need approval from the parliament. Now, does every agreement need the approval of parliament or only certain agreements? Now, here the answer is only certain agreement. Suppose if there is an agreement regarding if there is agreement regarding the Indian territory, suppose we want to acquire some territory or we want to give some territory to another country, then the approval of Parliament is must, and this has been cleared by the Honorable Supreme Court of India in Berubari versus Union of India case 1960. Here also the agreement which are rectified by the Parliament must be passed by the special majority, that is with the 2/3 majority of the House, 2/3 majority of the members present and the voting. Now let us take an example, like we have an agreement with the Bangladesh, land border agreement with the Bangladesh. So here the government has signed the agreement, but the government also need approval of Lok Sabha as well as Rajya Sabha. And when the approval is given by the Parliament, then we witness or then we see that the agreement is passed, or then we say that the agreement is implemented at the ground level. Now further, operationalizing key certain policy agreements may require the passage of complementary domestic laws as well, which is the exclusive pressure of the legislative and will thereby give an indirect role to the Parliament in foreign policy formulation. Suppose we are signing an agreement in USA, so we have to implement certain domestic laws in India to implement that agreement in our country. Now let us take an example. India has signed a nuclear agreement or nuclear deal with the USA. So if we want to implement that nuclear deal in India, then we have to pass certain domestic laws, and laws in India are made by Parliament. So certain foreign agreement need some domestic laws as well. So here we have witnessed that Parliament play a crucial role in determining or in formulation of foreign policy, because we need approval of Parliament for implementation of certain agreement. Now here comes the third important institution, that is the pressure group. In democracy, the pluralist theory of democracy argues that the state respond to various groups who are vocal about their interests. Now what do you mean by pressure groups? Now let us take an example of Kisan Union. Suppose an Indian government is signing an agreement regarding agriculture with United States of America. So here Indian government will be consulting with Kisan Union, because ultimately this agreement will be impacting farmers only. So here the government of India will consult the Kisan Union or will consult the other pressure groups which are responsible for implementation of these agreements in the country. Now, role of business group in the implementation or in the formulation of foreign policy. Historically, trade has followed the flag, but today flags have followed the trade. If I talk about 21st century, or with the onset of globalization, liberalization and privatization, we have witnessed an increasing role of business houses. Now we talk on trade, we talk on economy, we talk on money. Now everything in this world is related to money. We all are working, you all may be working after some year for the money, for earning something. So every country try to maintain a good relation on the basis of trade. No matter we have a dispute with China regarding borders, but still the trade is going on because money matters to us, money matters to China, money matters to India. The business houses influence the agenda setting of government. They also facilitate interaction between the prominent leaders of the different countries. Suppose I am taking an imaginary example. Now suppose let us take an example of particular company. Now I am taking again an imaginary example, like Ambanis are dealing with the South Africa, or Ambanis are setting their company in the South Africa. So Indian government will be having a good relation with that country because trade matters. Ultimately government is not doing trade, no, these private players, the big private players are doing the trade. So whenever the trade is going on, the government try to maintain a good relation with that country. Now these business houses influence the foreign policy, and these business houses also give funding to the government. Now where do these political parties get funding from? if I talk about any political party, XYZ, ABC, if I talk about any political party, they get funding from the business houses also. And these government facilitate these business houses to trade as much as possible and to gain as much as profit. Now these government lobbies with the other country to set up their manufacturing industries in that country. Now, if I talk about the pre-liberalization era, then trade was not important. The role of trade was very limited and small because Indian economy was not opened up, our economy was closed. But after 1991, when we have liberalized our economy, the role of trade has increased in our foreign policy formulation. Now coming ahead, now we will be seeing about the role of media in foreign policy formulation. See, what is the function of media? Media sets the perception. Suppose if I am showing on media that particular deal between USA and India is good, ultimately you will be seeing it and you will be saying that deal is good, Indian government has to sign it. So ultimately media build our perception, media create our perception. So media indirectly influence the foreign policy of a country, and media being an important part, it is considered as a fourth pillar of democracy. It sets the agenda. As the famous political philosopher Antonio Gramsci says, that media tries to establish as an hegemony. Like what Netflix is doing. Netflix is setting the agenda of United States of America. Whatever we are watching on Netflix, it is backed by the United States of America. So whether I talk about social media, Instagram, electronic media, or direct, if I talk about your newspaper also, they are setting an agenda, they are clearing grounds for the government to have a deal with the government. Now, even if I talk about the role of media, we can divide this into pre-liberalization and post-liberalization part. In pre-liberalization part, if I talk, the media was not having much control. Most of the channels are owned by the government itself. But if I talk about the globalization, now with the onset of your famous apps like Snapchat, Instagram, WhatsApp, they have circulated news beyond boundaries. So in the globalization era, we witnessed that there are multiple news channels, there are multiple newspapers. You can read what is written in the New York Times. Even the citizen living in the United States of America can read that what is written in the Hindustan Times or in the Indian Express or in the Dainik Bhaskar or Patrika, any newspaper. So with the onset of globalization, we have witnessed that information can flow beyond boundary, and these information set agenda for the government to pursue particular foreign policy. Even if I talk about government try to maintain a good relation with the state and the other media houses, even the media project a particular political party as a good or bad according to their own interest. Now, what are the observations regarding media? Despite so many structural changes, the media is yet to play a significant role in scrutinizing the strengths and weaknesses of key foreign policy. I would say that Indian media is good in the domestic affairs, but in the foreign affairs there are many improvements needed. Indian media have to increase their reach, or if I not talk about Indian media, if I talk about media as a general, so we are more concentrated on the domestic policies only rather than the foreign policy. Now reasons, what are the reasons why media is lacking behind? Because it lacks a business model for international coverage. Our media houses don't have a business model for international coverage. They have few or no correspondent in the foreign countries. Only key foreign policy and national security issues related coverage, the media houses largely rely upon ex-diplomat or the ex-military personnel, which is largely a sync with government position. Due to this reason, IFS officer often take prides that it can get media what it wants in the coverage of foreign policy. So I think you are done or you are clear with the role of media in influencing the foreign policy. Now here comes the role of Prime Minister Office, the role of PMO in influencing the foreign policy of a country. See, Prime Minister Office is the most powerful office in our country. The formulation of Indian foreign policy has largely evoked consensus and has been largely dominated by Prime Minister's office. Whatever the will of Prime Minister is the foreign policy of our country. Whatever the will of the President of United States of America is the foreign policy of American country, is the foreign policy of USA. So if I talk about the Nehruvian era, if I talk about, now let us take an example, like in the Nehruvian era, the non-alignment was exclusively decided by our then Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. It was a decision taken by the Prime Minister office. Then if I talk about the era of Indira Gandhi, the military intervention in the Bangladesh, signing of Treaty of Peace and Friendship with the Soviet Union is again a decision taken by the Prime Minister office. Now if I take an example of Rajiv Gandhi government, the diplomat of IFPF in Sri Lanka is again a decision taken by the PMO. Now if I talk about the Gujral or IK Gujral, then the decision taken by the policy of the Gujral Doctrine is again the decision taken by the Prime Minister office. So Prime Minister office play a crucial role in determining the foreign policy of any country or foreign policy of India. Now the role of National Security Council. There was an intelligence absence of war in 1962 and 1965. Following this, recommendations were calling from all sides to establish a deliberate foreign policy specifically in security matter. In 1998, Vajpayee government established a National Security Council. Since we have an intelligence failure in 1962 war and 1965 war, so there was a need to create a separate body who will see these small things like what's happening on the border area. So a body was created in 1998 known as National Security Council. It also influenced the foreign policy formulation. Now the role of Ministry of External Affairs, again an important institution who take all the major decisions regarding foreign policy formulation. Now you know that Minister for External Affairs take all the major decisions, but Minister of External Affairs has a team and this team submit the report to the minister and then minister take decisions accordingly. It is not alone the minister, it is a teamwork, a complete teamwork of Ministry of External Affairs, Indian Foreign Service officers, ex-diplomat and other bureaucratic persons. So let us understand the structure of MEA. MEA is expected and considered as desirable that MEA must play a proactive role in foreign policy formulation. Now MEA is divided into 12 divisions. Our Ministry of External Affairs is divided into 24 divisions. In that 12 are divided into territorial division and 12 are functional division. Now what is territorial division? This division which looks specific strategical location, like suppose particular group is assigned with the South Asia, then another group is assigned with the North America, then another group is assigned with the East Asia. So these group is responsible for strategic location. They see the strategic location and frame policies accordingly. Then functional division group, what does the functional division group do? It look for the different functions like UN proceedings, protocols. So it's talk about different functions of WTO, World Bank. So some intellectual or some persons from the Ministry of External Affairs work in this direction so that we can work even on the functional part also. Now we will evaluate the role of MEA. Now in MEA there is a shortage of IFS officer. Then again linguistic proficiency, linguistic issue, like suppose if we have deployed our Indian foreign officers into African continent or even we have deployed into any other eastern region. So language is the barrier, because when we deploy IFS officer we have to train them, we have to make them learn the language of that particular country. Then again after 2 to 3 years or 5 years they will transfer to different country. So there is an issue regarding language. Now organizational structure should be revamped more. Now, communication with the other government bodies and agencies and association with the political class, these are some of the major issues which affect the foreign policy formulation. So, these were the major issues, or these were the major institutions that are responsible for foreign policy formulation. I think you have understood everything, and we are done with the foreign policy, who implements, who determines, and who implement them at the ground level, what are the institutions responsible for them. So, thank you very much.